Thanks. I really appreciate that introduction. I'm excited to be talking here about this subject. I think that I had this unique perspective on history as it unfolded just 12 miles from my front door. I want to take a second to acknowledge from the start here that these photos of the birth of a new civil rights era are shot from my perspective as a middle-aged white guy. And I feel that as a group they are a good representation of the events, but I realize that other people may have experienced these events differently than me. So I'm not saying that this is the only thing that happened in Ferguson. I'm saying that these are the events that I saw. And so to start off with, I just want to kind of set the scene for people about Ferguson. This is a map of St. Louis County and St. Louis City. You can see the city in the darker blue and Ferguson in the red. Ferguson is one of 90-plus municipalities in the St. Louis area, and it's not a huge town. It's a population of about 21,000. If you told me that Ferguson was going to become a flashpoint for the new civil rights era, I don't know if I would have believed that prior to 2014. In reading the Department of Justice's report on Ferguson and the policing that was taking place there, you know, maybe of course that was going to be the spot, but sometimes it's hard to see until things happen. Up until that time, I'd covered Ferguson. It was just, you know, one of the towns I covered, and I went up and I made pictures in. This is a daughter and her father. This is a 4th of July parade in Ferguson. This is some high school kids or middle school kids working on a project at school where they were solving an engineering problem underwater. And this was a community coming together to mourn for a post office employee who was struck and killed by a bolt of lightning. And in 2011, a monster tornado came through Ferguson, and it crushed parts of the town. It came through this church and tore the roof off this church for the Good Friday services, and it really left a mark on the city. So that was, you know, up until 2014, those were some of my experiences with Ferguson. It's just another one of our you know, suburbs of St. Louis. So let's go to August 9th, 2014. Now I want to remind people that some of the photos in the tweets that you're going to see here are going to be of a graphic nature. If you're sensitive to that, you may want to not watch here for a few minutes. I think most of the graphic stuff is over fairly shortly, but on August 9th, 2014, I was at Target and I was doing some back-to-school shopping with my wife and my daughter, and I got this message that, you know, I needed to be covering this story, and this is what was going on. So let me come up here to the first video. I'm going to play a video here. This is how it started. And so those are the radio calls from the first, from when Ferguson first began happening. And you saw some of the initial tweets. You saw some of the initial tweets from the scene there, with the guy tweeting within a minute or so that, oh my God, he'd just seen this guy get killed. I'm at Target. I'm doing some back-to-school shopping with my wife and daughter, like I said, and I start getting these tweets from this guy, Tori Russell. Tori and I had been following each other on social media for a while, oh, let's see, did I switch back? I did. Tori and I had been following each other on social media for a while, and he reached out to me and said, you know, look, here's something you got to do, and it's a picture of this guy holding a sign that says, Ferguson police just executed my unarmed son. And I'm like, I didn't really know what to do about it at this point because, you know, I really wasn't working, but, you know, I felt compelled to call in the office and be like, hey, do we know this is going on? What's going on? And I talked with our Sunday editor, and he goes, yes, we know about this. We have a reporter on the way, and one of our photographers is going out there as well. And I said, that's great. I said, I'm going to go back to shopping with my wife. Let me know if there's anything else you need from me. And this is the start of the start of how this kind of evolved. Is this narrative started to take place on social media, and I was down at Target and I was sort of interested in the story, and I start seeing all these tweets come across, you know, of this body laying in the street and all this outrage taking place from the community. And so I called the photographer and I said, hey, do you need help? And he said, yeah, you know, maybe I could use some help. Why don't you come on up there? And now I'm a news photographer, and I pride myself on getting there quickly to events. One of the facts of of this incident is that Michael Brown's body laid in the street for 4.5 hours after he was shot. And I usually pride myself on getting to things quickly. But the first picture I'm able to make as I arrive at the scene is the firefighters hosing Michael Brown's blood off the street. And so, you know, I'm pretty late to the scene. You know, I'm kind of just coming up because my coworker asked me to. My coworker Hui Mok, and so I see this. People are actually upset that this blood is being washed off the street. They think that, you know, the police are trying to cover something up. But, you know, I was talking to some of them, and I said, well, you know, actually at a lot of scenes, unfortunately I go to a lot of shooting scenes, a lot of scenes, they do wash the blood off the street because it's a biohazard. And then this is one of the first real pictures I made in Ferguson. This is Michael Brown's uncle, and he is praying, you know, praying and grieving over the loss of his nephew. He's a preacher in town, and you know, he was, you know, really upset about his nephew being killed.
Hey, David,
yes.
I'm going to interrupt you because I don't think we can see the images you're referring to.
Oh, okay. Well, let's.
I think you got to switch it back from video.
How did we get? Let me see.
Steven's here, so bear with us, folks.
There we go. Can you see?
Yes.
Yep, there you go.
Yep, we're good. Thank you, David.
Let me go back. I'm sorry. Let me get back to presenter view. Okay, we can just see one picture now, right?
Yes, one picture.
Great. Okay. So this is Michael Brown's. Uncle, and he's praying at the scene there for Michael. And Michael Brown's blood is still in the street. Even though they took a fire hose to it, it didn't wash all the blood off the street. Other people had came out and they started to gather, and the community was really upset about this shooting. And people started to gather. More people came from down the street where police had been holding them. And Michael Brown's mother, who's the woman in red in the center, came down the street, and she started to drop rose petals on the spot where the blood was on the street. People were upset. There was a lot of screaming going on. Michael Brown's mother went over and started crying. You know, people were just, they were really angry about this shooting, and they felt that it was unjust. I was taking part, you know, I had seen the stuff on Twitter, and I wanted to contribute there on Twitter, and so, you know, I was doing some tweeting while I was there as well, and police said that, you know, they were going to be, protesters said, or not even protesters, people in the community said that they were going to go down to the police station here at this point. And I was like, okay, that's sort of a far walk, but we'll see where that goes. Let's see. So I went down to the police station, and there was nothing going on there. Nobody ended up showing up down there, but Hui Mok, my coworker who had stayed down at the scene, said, hey, you need to get back down here. Something's going on. And what happened was police had come back down the scene. Someone had set fire to a trash can or something like that, and police had come back down the scene. And if you remember where Michael Brown's mother was dropping the rose petals, the police cars ended up driving right over those petals, and it really upset the crowd. And so the police got out of their car, and some of them got out with rifles, and the crowd was all swarming around them. I have to say, and I don't believe that the police intentionally ran over this. It didn't, like, I don't think they saw it as a memorial at the time. I think that they were trying to avoid all the people in the street who were gathered around with their hands up. If you remember the term "hands up, don't shoot," this is the first time that "hands up, don't shoot" was ever done. It was started by an older activist in town called Anthony Shahid, and it just kind of came out generically. And so the protester, the people are surrounding the cops, and they're chanting, and the police brought out their dogs. And it was kind of reminiscent. I felt like I was looking at something from the '60s, and it was hard to look at there and stuff. It was a very tense scene, and people were upset, and the cops were trying to calm them down. We're going to play the second video here. Hopefully we get that back a little bit easier this time. Let's see. So this is the second video. No, that's not the second video. Okay, why is it not? I can see it. I'm going to give this one more second. Okay. And there it is. Okay, this is the second video. Okay, we're going to go back to the screen. Okay, I assume that you guys can just see a single photo now. Let me know if you don't. Let me know if you don't see that.
Nope,
so,
we can see it.
Great. So as it went, the police pulled out of the scene. They went. Protesters now started showing up at the police station over there, and they were rallying across the street. This is Tori Russell here, and this is the first time I'd ever met Tori in person. Before that, we had only interacted on Twitter. Funny story about Tori here. Tori wore a suit to the protest here the first day because he thought that that's what you wore to when you came to protest. He was not he was not a real big activist. He's since turned into quite the activist here in town, and is very present at a lot of events. And so there was a small group of people went into the police station, and they demanded to see the police. One of the police lieutenants came out and didn't really provide any information at all to the people, but they, they felt like, that they'd at least expressed their opinion to the police. And they went back outside and joined the protest. So I went back outside. It looked like things were winding down for the night. People were talking about there being a candlelight vigil the next day in memorial of Michael Brown. So I called my boss and I said, hey, I'm going to leave, but we should make sure we get someone out to this candlelight vigil tomorrow. These 4 photos are by one of our other staff photographers, J.B. Forbes, and J.B. was scheduled to work on that Saturday. So J.B. went right over to Ferguson on Sunday and began working. And, there was some more conflict between the police and the residents. The police chiefs held a press conference. They took questions and provided their first narrative events in which they said that Michael Brown physically assaulted a police officer, and the police officer shot Michael Brown in defense. During that struggle, they said that Brown reached in the car and was reaching for Wilson's gun. Police at this point were refusing to release the officer's name. And during the day, the crowd was openly hostile towards the police, and the police brought out their dogs for the second time in 2 days to control the crowd. It was a big crowd that was gathered for the candlelight vigil then later that day. This is another photo that JB shot. And so I'm sitting at home, and I'm kind of seeing all this stuff happen on social media, and I'm not working again that day. And I've talked to JB, and he says he doesn't need any help or anything, so I'm like, great. And but after the candlelight vigil, the crowd began to turn on the local media who was there covering the event. This was really still a local story at this point. And they turned on the local media, and they started to get hostile with the police, who had also showed up in the area. And they were physically threatening a number of the local media. And so, you know, JB had to pull back, but, you know, it was clearly a very tense scene. And JB said, "Hey, you know, can you come in and help me?" And I said, "That's great." And I'll take a drive in. And so I started to come in, and another one of our photographers, Robert Cohen, also went in. And I could tell as I was sitting at home on my couch that this was a powder, you know, that this was just a powder keg, and someone was going to have to show some restraint or back down, otherwise it was just going to keep escalating. And you know, police had now showed up at the scene, and they were in riot gear, and some people began throwing rocks and bottles at the police and anything else they could find. And so, you know, JB called and said, you know, "Can you come in and help?" And I said, "Sure." And I went upstairs and I told my wife that it was helping our daughter get ready for bed, that I was going into work. You know, Ferguson's only about 12 miles from my front house, but between my house and there is the newspaper. And so I stopped by the newspaper to pick up some long lenses because I thought I was going to be covering this from a distance. And while I was there picking up the lenses, I also went by something, we call it the war closet, because we keep bulletproof vests and gas masks and ballistic helmets in there. And typically we only go into this if we're going into, you know, a hostile environment like a war zone. But I'd been out there the night before, and I just thought, you know, it might be a good idea just to have some, you know, bulletproof vests and stuff. And so I grabbed a couple of sets for me and my coworkers, and I headed up there. As I'm driving up there, I get a call from one of our editors who says, "Hey, you know, you should try to get to the Quick Trip. That looks like it's the center of what's going on." And there's police cars just flying by me, you know, at 100 miles an hour on the highway trying to get up there. And as I get up there, all these streets are blocked down, and I can't really get close to the scene. But I eventually get to be within 3 blocks of the scene. I'm like, okay, this is good enough. I'm gonna have to get out and walk in from here. So I get out and I hear the sirens blaring, I hear yelling, and it's dark. I pop my trunk and I put on my bulletproof vest and a ballistic helmet, and I strap a gas mask to my leg, throw my computer in a backpack over my shoulders, and I grab my cameras and I start walking towards the Quick Trip. And as I'm walking to myself, I'm talking a little bit to myself too, and I'm like, "David, you look like an idiot." And honestly, I did look like an idiot. You know, I mean, this is Ferguson. It's a suburb of St. Louis. Why was I wearing all this? So after about a block of walking, I took off my helmet and I strapped it to my belt. And I got a little closer to the Quick Trip, and I could see this intense confusion and chaos going on. And the yelling was now louder, and people were running in all different directions. And I heard a couple of gunshots in the distance, and I thought, well, you know, maybe I'll just put this helmet back on. And so I walked into the scene. And I kind of walked out around the side of this Quick Trip, and I walked out to the front of it, and I began talking to myself again. I was right in front of the Quick Trip, and I'm making some pictures with a 70-200 millimeter lens, and I could see that the store had been looted and people had broken some of the windows. But I'm talking to myself, and I'm like, "David, you got to get closer to the scene. You got to walk over and take a look inside the store." And I was like trying to psych myself up for it. And you know, if you were standing next to me, you'd swear I was crazy. So I took a deep breath, and I walked over to the front of the store. And right about the time as I was arriving at the front of the store, my coworker Robert Cohen, who was getting there, you know, also got to the front of the Quick Trip and made this picture of me. And he had a few choice words for me later on when he gave me this picture. He was not happy I'd gone over here. But I was making some pictures of people coming in and out of the store with some goods. This guy grabbed a few bottles of wine and jumped through the window. But I'm talking to this other guy who's over there. He's come up and he started filming to me, and I'm like, "Hey, it's a crazy night, huh?" And he's like, "Yeah, who are you?" And I tell him, you know, I'm a photographer for the Post-Dispatch, and we chat a little bit. And I look in the store, and it seems pretty calm, and no one's actually in there that I can tell at this point. So I turned to this guy I've just met, and I said, "Hey, the next dude who goes in there, I think I'm gonna follow him in. Can you watch my back?" And he's like, "Sure." You know, and for some reason, you know, that seemed like a good idea to me. And so I go on the Quick Trip, and he continues filming. This is a screen grab from his YouTube thing where he says the guy in the gear was a reporter from the Post-Dispatch. He told me, because he didn't know who I was at this point. And one of the first pictures I made is this guy come around the corner wearing a Trayvon Martin T-shirt, and he's grabbed some beer and some other stuff out of the store. And I go around the next corner of the Quick Trip, and this kid is, he's grabbing bottles of Pepsi because, I don't know, I guess, when you're a kid, all the other, you steal Pepsi because all the other good stuff's been taken. I don't know, but he's grabbing 2-liter bottles of Pepsi. But as I'm shooting this picture of this kid, I hear this voice behind me. He goes, "Hey, what are you doing?" And it's this deep voice, and I turn around and I see this huge guy standing behind me, and he's got to be 6 inches taller than me and 100 pounds heavier, and he raises up his chin a little bit and lifts up his T-shirt to reveal a handgun he's got tucked in the waistband of his pants, and I'm just like, I'm a photographer for the Post-Dispatch. And he looks at me some more, and I tell him, I said, your face is covered, no one will know who you are, you'll be fine. And he goes, okay. And he goes back to looting the store. And I had probably the biggest exhale of my entire life at that point. I'm like, whew. And so he goes back and he grabs a box of lemon-flavored 5-Hour Energy, and he's standing behind the counter. And I shot this photo of him at this point, and I very quickly realized I was pushing my luck, and it was time to go. I'd been inside the store for less than 2 minutes, and I can tell that from the timestamps on my camera, but it felt like I'd been in there for an hour. So I ran out the door and across the street, and I hid behind these garbage dumpster because I knew I had to send these photos back, and it was on deadline. And this garbage dumpster screen that I was behind, I could see out, and I felt like it gave me a little bit of shelter and stuff. So I called my boss and I said, "Hey, look, I'm sending you a few photos from the Quick Trip. My adrenaline's so jacked up that I can't caption them. You're going to have to caption them yourself." And I sent 6 photos back, and just as this photo's popping into the system, the managing editor of the paper comes up to my boss, Lyndon Steele, and says, "Tell everyone out there not to take any stupid risks." And my boss turns the computer towards him and shows him this picture and says, "Too late." So, I've kind of learned at this point, I've kind of learned my lesson about going inside a Quick Trip. So the police were forming a big line up the street. There's probably 100 officers or so up the street. And so I go and I stand a little bit closer to them. It kind of feels more secure up towards them. There's all this chaos going on back down towards the Quick Trip. But I didn't want to get too close to the cops because I was afraid they were going to kick me out of the scene. So I spent the next 10 minutes just standing on the side of the road talking to people. I talked to a local alderman, Antonio French, and shot a quick video of a preacher who was just standing in the middle of the road directing traffic. And someone came running down the road saying, "The Quick Trip's on fire, the Quick Trip's on fire." So I figured I'd take a walk back down towards the Quick Trip. And I wasn't going to go in, but I was going to, just stand out by the side where the sign was and just see if I could see anything. And I couldn't really see any significant smoke coming out of the Quick Trip, and someone had spray painted snitch on the QT sign. But 2 large groups of people had formed, and one was over here to the left, and then one was over here to the right. And someone from this group sees me making pictures, and they say, "Hey, he's shooting pictures. Get him. Kick his ass." And I'm like, "Oh shit." And I turned and I just started running back towards that line of police I'd showed you a little bit earlier. Now, I don't really run fast as it is, but if I have on a bulletproof vest and a helmet and a gas mask and a backpack and 2 cameras on my shoulders, I'm just flat out slow. So I got about halfway back to that line of police, and someone cut up to me, and they hit me in the head really hard, and I began to fall to the ground. And like how in movies, how things happen in slow motion, that's how I remember falling to the ground. I remember seeing one of my cameras hit the ground, and the lens smash into the ground and scatter across the ground, and I was kind of rolling to the side. This is what my camera looked like at that time. And I rolled to the side, and the guy that hit me in the head comes up to me, and he tries to kick me, and I kind of block it with my thigh as I laid on the ground, and I swung this broken camera at him to try to get him away from me. And just as he was coming in to kick me again, that preacher I had done a quick video interview with came in and started yelling, "Leave him alone, leave him alone, leave him alone." And that gave me just enough time to get back to my feet and get away. So now I went over and I stood really close to the police. And they surprisingly did not kick me out. I don't know why, but they were pretty cool about me being there. They had started to arrest some people on the scene, and then they went down to try to clear out the Quick Trip. The police are moving in, and while I'm doing all this, I'm tweeting out a little bit and stuff. The Quick Trip was burning, so I took a quick video of that. and the police came in and started to fire tear gas. It was a chaotic scene. There were sirens, and there was tear gas, and there was smoke in the air from the burning Quick Trip. And the Quick Trip is just going up in total flames. At the same time, a call comes over the radio that there's a report of an officer who had been shot. That report turns out to be false, but there were cop cars just zipping around the neighborhood. And then 5 or 6 gunshots came from across the field, and all the officers started taking cover. It was the craziest situation I've ever been in. And the Quick Trip was still burning because the firefighters couldn't come in to put out the Quick Trip because of all the gunfire. And then I got kicked out because this police captain was like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm a photographer with the Post-Dispatch, and I'm doing my job." He's like, "No, you're not. You're out of here." And I pleaded with him a little bit, trying to tell him I was better prepared for this than most of his officers, that I had a gas mask and a ballistic helmet and a higher level vest than most of his guys. But he didn't care, and he assigned an officer to take me out of the scene. He put me in a police car, and he started driving me towards a local police station. And I was like, "Am I under arrest?" And I didn't want to ask the cop, but I didn't want to put the idea into his head or anything like that. But I was texting my boss. I'm like, "I might be under arrest. I'm not sure. I'm going to the Jennings police station. If you don't hear from me in 15 minutes, come bail me out." And so we pulled up to the Jennings police station. We started to pull around back to the Sally Port, and he let me out. And I'm like, "Whew, I'm not arrested." So that's just through Sunday night there. The next day, I didn't sleep that much. I went back to the Quick Trip first thing in the morning to get my car, and I think it was interesting here that some people at the scene were talking about MLK's quote about rioting, that riot is the language of the unheard. As long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having recurrences of violences and riots like this over and over again. Social justice and progress are absolute guarantors of riot prevention. And so people were out there on the scene, and they weren't. Some people weren't that upset about the Quick Trip being burned, and other people were shocked by it. Other businesses had also been looted. And so I kind of went home for a while to get some sleep, and I came back later that night, and it was like Groundhog Day, and you're going to hear me say that a bunch of times. Some more national media had begun to arrive at this point, and police had fired some tear gas. Let's see, and so now we got a video I'm going to play for you. This is probably the last video. Let's see. And so this is that's not the video I want. Stop. There it is. I'm going to make it That's not the video. I'm sorry that this is a little clunky. There we go. This is the video. I found that woman's video just to be very compelling. So I always like playing that video when I'm trying to provide some perspective here on it. So the police were out there, and they're lined up, and they're threatening me with arrest. They're threatening everyone with arrest out there. These people are trying to get back to their cars, and they can't get back to their cars. And this night just ended. So then, the Quick Trip was becoming this gathering place. This was Tuesday, and people would bring by food for the protesters, and, people were driving by in their cars. And the police had come, and they had started to line up and form a blockade. And, again, this was Tuesday, and people are trying to the police have now formed a blockade across the street, and these people are trying to get home to their apartments in their cars and, with their kids, and the police are not letting them through. And so, this is upsetting. Upsetting them. And then the same day, police also got up on top of their armored vehicle and pointed a scoped sniper rifle at the crowd of people who are really at this point, they're standing in the street and they're holding signs and they're not obeying orders to disperse, but there hasn't really been anything thrown at officers or anything at this point in the day. And it just, it enraged some in the crowd that the officers were pointing this scoped sniper rifle at a crowd of women that had women and children and people that were, mostly peaceful at this point. And so, but this standoff just sort of continued, and this is like 3 hours later, and the police are still blocking the street, and the protesters are kind of still out there and stuff, and they're tweeting, and the cops are out in force, and this group of guys in like jeans and some in uniforms, and this is a little bit symbolic of sort of the disorganized response of police response that took place up there. It was one of the things mentioned in the DOJ report was that they put out this call for aid and assistance, and they got officers in from all over, but it was never really clear who was in the chain of command in the early days there. And so the protesters just kept looking at people. Or kept looking at the police, and the police were just looking at them, and the protesters would chant and yell at the police, and occasionally someone would throw something at the police, and tensions would come up, and then they would come back down. But the police never really engaged at this point, and so there was sort of some of that restraint shown on both sides. Like the protesters, didn't continue to escalate things, and the police didn't continue to escalate things, and so eventually things calmed down, and that group of protesters turned and walked away, and then it was empty. It was just, there was no one down there. It was sort of eerie. The police then left in a big rush to something, and it turns out they were leaving because they had actually had a confrontation with someone else about a mile away up the street, and police had actually shot and wounded a man up there, and they were actively searching for a man who was with him. They were stopping cars and stuff. And while this is going on, they're trying to search and find this other suspect. Police start firing tear gas. And I can hear all this taking place over the corner. And one of my coworkers, Robert Cohn, had been out with me, and he actually left with the group that turned and marched away. And so he was on the other side of this police line where all the tear gas was being fired in. And then Robert made what is potentially the most iconic picture of the Ferguson protest. This is Robert Cohen's photo. And I can hear all this tear gas being fired and these flashbangs going off and stuff, and I know that something real is going on over there. But Robert gets this picture of this guy Edward Crawford, who was not even really part of the protest. He was just coming home from work and stuff, and he ended up coming by to see what was going on, and he got kind of sucked up into it. And so police fired this can of tear gas, and he picked up the can of tear gas and he threw it back, and he became an icon. Sadly, last year, Edward Crawford, police say that Edward Crawford shot and killed himself in a suicide. There's some people that dispute that, but it appears to be that he was upset and did kill himself. He was upset about a relationship with a woman or something, I think. But this image of Edward is going to live on forever and continues to live on. I mean, people have tattoos of this on their body, and it's all over the place. Now, when Robert made this picture, he made this picture at like 12:15 at night. Our page designer had gone home for the day, so this picture never actually ran in our paper until a week later. When responding to all this social media traction that it had gotten, we ended up running the picture huge horizontally across our paper. So then we enter day 5, and it's, you know, the police and the protesters start conflicting some more. They're back down in front of the Quick Trip, and people are down there with signs, and the police are blocking the road again, and some families are down there with kids, and, you know, people are bringing their kids down because they want them to see history. And this night, you know, and there was a difference between things that happened, you know, the protests that happened in the day versus the protests that happened at night as it got dark. The protests in the day tended to be very calm and, I don't know, calm, but, you know, more orderly and not as much violence and sort of antagonism between both sides. And then as things got dark and it became nighttime, you know, the tension, you know, palpably, you know, was more evident, and, you know, protesters would start throwing rocks, and more police would come out in riot gear, and they would be squared off and facing each other. This particular night, they were trying to make Molotov cocktails. These were not successful, particularly successful attempts at Molotov cocktails, but they were making an attempt at making a Molotov cocktail. And then police fired more tear gas. And then I just want to show you what this scene looked like here and stuff. This is from, and one of the other weird things that was going on, well, I don't know if it's weird, but one of the other things that was going on out there was there was live streamers, and everybody had a camera out there and stuff. And it was crazy to, you know, because everyone was out there recording everything all the time, and you couldn't, you know, I think it was hard for the police sometimes to figure out who were the media and who, you know, like what. Let's give me this 1 second to make this come up here. Let's see, radio calls, and then there we go. Okay, so this is what it looked like out there. The sound you're going to hear at the beginning is a sonic cannon that the police were using. It's a real high-pitched thing. It's a pain compliance thing. And this was a video that's shot by a live streamer, and so his perspective on it is a little bit different. But this is how a lot of people were experiencing Ferguson. I'm going to let this play a little bit. You can actually see me there in the black shirt. I'm second from the right. And so you can see that tear gas is just getting rained in front of the protesters and in back of the protesters, and everyone kind of retreats back into a neighborhood and stuff. And this is just, you know, a neighborhood of ranch houses, you know, and it was amazing because, you know, it looked like a war zone, but this was, you know, suburban St. Louis. So I'm going to go back to the screen. Okay, we're back to the single photo. And so, you know, this picture is what came from that night. Okay. So now we're on to Thursday. The funny thing that started off about Thursday was the police were like, you know, they were denying in the media reports that they were denying using rubber bullets the night before, and I knew that was wrong because I'd been there and I heard them whizzing by and I heard people getting hit by them there and stuff. And so I went down to like where that scene was last night, and yeah, sure enough, you know, there's rubber bullets and pepper balls and you know, tear gas canisters all over the place and stuff. So, you know, one of the things you had to do in Ferguson was, you know, you had to sift through all the false information and social media rumors that people were accepting as fact and sort of try to find, you know, what the truth actually was. And everyone, including the police, the protesters, the live streamers, were all putting out their own version of the narrative. And, you know, the mainstream media had their version of the narrative, too. So, you know, it was the tussle for the narrative was an interesting thing. On this day, the governor said that, it was going to be a new day in Ferguson and there's going to be a new command structure, and he put this he put Captain Ron Johnson from the Missouri Highway Patrol in charge of the police response. And it was very different, immediately it was a very different response. He's standing out in the road shaking hands with the protesters, and he's getting hugs, and he's addressing them in just his regular police uniform. He doesn't wear riot gear. St. Louis City police officers came out, and they're also talking with, protesters and, seeing, making their voice heard, expressing their First Amendment right to protest. The Quick Trip had become a big gathering point still, and people were using chalk to write messages. This boy had some forehead paint on. He was up visiting his grandmother from Texas, and she brought him over to see what was going on down at the Quick Trip. People gathered down at the scene of where the shooting had took place, and there was a big vigil down there. And then as darkness started to come, the police kind of stayed back, and let the people protest out in the street. And there was a candlelight vigil out in front of the Quick Trip, and people held signs. But it was mostly calm, and the police weren't around. And then people started to drive by in their cars, and there's all this horn honking going on. It's like this symphony of car horns, and but the vibe was very different than the previous nights, and it was like this party protest vibe. And I think like that night I was calling it a partest. It was like this combination protest party thing, and it was just weird. And people would drive by in their cars with their hands up, and it was the first night in 4 nights when we hadn't had tear gas fired on West Florissant. So that was interesting. I don't have any photos from Friday, August 15th, because I took that day off. I was exhausted physically and emotionally drained. After the protest on Thursday night, I thought maybe the protest had turned a corner and that we were headed for maybe a more peaceful time. And I was wrong. The police held a press conference that Friday, and they released Officer Darren Wilson's name as the officer who had shot and killed Mike Brown. And they also released a video surveillance showing a clip of Mike Brown pushing a store owner into a display of chips and taking some merchandise with him as he left. There's actually a documentary out there called Stranger Fruit that deals specifically with the release of this video. It offers an alternative point of view about what that video actually shows and didn't show, and maybe should have shown, because there was more video before that. But if you want to look up that video, you can take a listen to what their point of view is on it. Protesters also marched in the street with flowers, and they continued to embrace Ron Johnson that night. And it looked like the night was going to go with no tear gas, and so the page on the left was, this is our headline earlier in the night. It was, calm in the streets, and then everything went to hell. Some looting and rioting began to break out again, and there was gunfire. I think that Robert Cohen was out here this night, and I talked to Robert at about 11 o'clock as I was going to bed. I'm like, you don't need me? He goes, no, it's all calm. It's good here. You can just go to bed, get some sleep, man. And I woke up at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I was like, oh my God! And I picked up my phone. I was like, darn it! It went off, and like I felt like I'd let down my coworkers by not being there to document, all this stuff that had taken place. But I needed that day off. So I go back the next day, and the crowd is back, and it's large, and people are continuing to march in the street. Residents are talking about what's been going on in the neighborhood. Kids are out in the neighborhood soaking it in. This mom is holding up her child, and she's like, oh, this is my Mike Brown, to the passing cars. This is a tragic story. This guy in the white shirt was actually at the protest, and I photographed him there on this day. He was shot and killed by police after about 7 months later. He was having a mental crisis. His mother called police to try to help control him. And the police he came out of his mother's house with a sword, and police shot him, and they killed him. So that was, this guy's out there protesting police violence, and he ends up dying of police violence, but, 7 months later. So police instituted a curfew. You couldn't be out. The curfew was widely ignored, and so we had tear gas again later that night. Then on Monday, so this weekend's going on, and we're trying to figure out, okay, we're starting week 2 of this protest. What haven't we done? And we're like, well, we've not really showed what it's like from the police perspective. And so I'd done a few police ride-alongs over the years, and I called one of my contacts at the police department. I said, hey, do you think I could go in with the tactical team? And he's like, yeah, sure, I think we can make that happen. I was like, oh, wow, I didn't think they were going to say yes. And so I find myself on Monday night, I'm embedded with the police tactical team. Now, these are some of the same guys who the week before had been hitting me with tear gas and shooting rubber bullets at me and threatening to arrest me, and now I'm embedded with them and, hanging out. So that was a strange feeling at times. And so they're hanging out and they're loading up tear gas for the night to prepare to go out, and the mood is light there, but serious. And they gather together and they pray, and they're watching the news on their TV, on their phones there and stuff, and then they're just waiting to get called into the scene. And then so now, after a week of covering the protest and standing shoulder to shoulder with the protesters, I'm now standing shoulder to shoulder with a bunch of police officers, and I'm seeing it, I'm documenting it from their perspective. And there's incoming of rocks and bottles being thrown and stuff that I had to duck out of the way of a few times, and police are trying to arrest a few of the instigators from the crowd. And then this is going on. This is, these guys are just standing around, looking at the cops, and the cops are telling them to go home. And then someone fired 3 gunshots, and the police responded with, more tear gas. And so this was a picture that I was just, it was crazy. I had not seen a picture like this before. When I sent this picture back to my boss was like, oh my God, this looks like a video game, but he goes, I don't know if we can run this. I'm like, oh, we're running that. That's what it looks like out here. So I don't think we're going to have time to show this video because we're starting to run out of time. But the police ended up arresting like 10 people in the back of this pickup truck. And in the pickup truck, this guy had a gun in his bag. It had a tape job on the handle and stuff. They also recovered a large Molotov cocktail out of the back of the truck. And they arrested all these guys. And then unfortunately they also arrested 2 journalists while I was out there, and this was something that was really a problem for me. I didn't think these guys should be arrested, but I didn't feel like I could interfere with this and tell these guys that, tell the police officers I was embedded with that, because I felt like I would have been influencing the story, and so I don't really know how to handle this. And so when we got back to the compound where they were placing these guys under arrest, I went over to that public affairs officer who I felt it would be appropriate for me to talk with, and I said, hey, listen, it's not worth arresting journalists. And I still maintain that it's never a good idea to arrest a journalist. You don't want to arrest people who buy ink by the barrel. And they stuck with it. They arrested them. I believe both these gentlemen got settlements from the police for the arrest. But the police are tired, and they're wiped out, and they're falling asleep in the back of their armored vehicle, surrounded by their stuff. And this is interesting. This is the first time I ever saw a Black Lives Matter sign. I'm going to try to wrap this up here pretty quick. And this is before Black Lives Matter really became a thing. Up until this point, it had been hashtag Ferguson and Mike Brown, and so this was really just the beginning of it. There was actually a study done on this called Beyond the Hashtags, and it was done by the Center for Media and Social Impact at American University. The authors Dean Freelon at American University, Charlton McEwen from New York University, and Meredith Clark at the University of North Texas did this study of tweets containing Black Lives Matter, and you can see that in August, it's just barely beginning to register, and then it peaks up a little bit around Mike Brown's funeral, and then it really gets going in November during the non-indictment. And you can see that, this is a list of some of their data there as well. So the protests really begin to die down a little bit. We're coming up on Mike Brown's funeral. This is the day before Mike Brown's funeral was buried, and compared to protests a few weeks earlier, we're going on more than 2 weeks of protests. The protests now are very much smaller, and traffic is able to move freely along the road. And police are just kind of sitting there, and a few people are sitting there, and it's very calm. This is a photo by my coworker Robert Cohen. This is from Mike Brown's funeral. I was positioned down at the cemetery, and I made this picture of his funeral coffin being brought through the cemetery. And then this is afterwards, after everyone had left. It was just quiet. This is the day after Mike Brown was buried, and you are looking. It's just there was maybe 8 to 10 people out protesting all up and down this stretch of West Florissant. There was really no one there. So we kind of moved into this new phase of protesting where the original protests were more organic. The new phases were more planned protests and more sporadic, but they were more organized protests rather than the organic ones at the start. This was all right before the very largest protest of the Ferguson protest, and this was right before Ferguson October. This is from a scene where police had actually all these protesters had come into town for the start of Ferguson October the day before, and an off-duty St. Louis police officer shot and killed a teenager who turned and pointed a gun at them. And so all these protesters are there, and all these activists are there, and they really got down there and got in the face of it, and they really added fuel and energy to the weekend of protests, because this was some of the largest protests that took place. This was this is a protest march through downtown St. Louis, and it had organized labor and social justice groups and protesters and activists, and this was the largest march in St. Louis from the thing. Some of the more artistically inclined protesters made a mirrored coffin, and they would march this around in front of the police station and show it to the police, show their reflection to the police officers. And then this is a photo from outside of a Rams game. The guy in the black shirt had stolen the flag from a group of protesters who were protesting, and then this black woman's trying to take it back. And for me, this picture really symbolizes a lot about what the struggle became about there and stuff. People were battling for the control of America. This woman got arrested down at the same protest. And all this time, people were waiting for the grand jury announcement of whether Darren Wilson was going to be indicted and charged with the crime was going to come out. And so this was from churches that was going on. The leaves had fallen off the trees and snow had fell on the memorial, and people were waiting. And for the night of the grand jury indictment, I ended up re-embedding with the police because I had my contacts there. And so that was my job that night, was to photograph this. This is all the police officers watching the announcement being made. The room was silent. No one cheered when it was announced. Everyone in this room knew that the night was just beginning. And so the tactical team got called in again, and they moved down to the street. For some reason, Ferguson left up these season greetings things, which was over like all the protest photos that November, which was kind of weird. And people, there was tear gas, and there was more than a dozen buildings burned. But really, the police early in the night were really kept back from protesting. They didn't want, a decision had been made by somebody at some point where they were going to let some buildings burn and some buildings be looted, because the thought was that if they went out to try to stop that, there was going to be loss of life, and that the loss of life would have just added fuel to the protest. Eventually, the police got to go in and start, arresting people for looting. And it was weird because the National Guard was out and walking around too, and so this was just a McDonald's along West Florissant, and people would be out, blocking the street, protesting at stores. It was one of the things about Black Friday, because this happened. Flava Flav showed up at a protest, which was weird. At another protest, this guy drove through a line of protesters, and they'd stopped him, and he pulled out a gun when the protesters broke out his rear window. Some American flags got burnt, and you began to see the early things. We're into December here now, and this is the Ferguson Commission report starting to listen to the community and come up with ideas for what needs to be fixed and how they can fix it and stuff, and how the community can move forward. There wasn't always an easy, discussion. There was some tension even during these meetings. The scars from the earlier non-indictment night were still very visible in the community. And you know, before Ferguson had raised everyone's consciousness about police shootings in the St. Louis area, you know, we typically had 8 to 12 people a year killed by police, and most of the fatal shootings occurred with only, you know, limited local outrage and grief expressed, and they were sort of done for a day. This is actually a mother who is being informed by police on Christmas Eve that her teenage son had been shot and killed by police. You know, that's awful news for any mother to hear. And you know, police were, you know, say that, you know, that the kid that they shot, another teenager, had a gun, and there is surveillance tape of him with this gun, and it appears to show him pointing the gun at police. But you know, that's still this mother's child, and you know so the FBI does not track how many people are killed each year by police. Activists DeRay McKesson, Brittany Packnett, and Samuel Signoway, I'm sorry I'm butchering your name there, they started a website, mappingpoliceviolence.org, to track those numbers, and the websites collect comprehensive data on police killings nationwide and quantify quantify the impact of police violence in communities. And they present it in a searchable way where you can see it in charts, and this website ranks St. Louis as one of the worst places in the country for police shootings. And so people started paying attention to the problem now, and you know, they're filming the police all over the place. And this is a scene from a press conference that St. Louis police chief was having, and you know, this where a 14-year-old boy had been shot, and this other younger kid is, you know, kind of demanding accountability from the police chief with his phone. And people were challenging the police narrative of this shooting right away. The 14-year-old lived. 14-year-old that was shot in this incident lived. There was some change happening in Ferguson. We had newly elected aldermen, you know, 2 new black aldermen elected. Previously, there was only 1 black alderman in a city that was majority black, so there's some more representation. And Wesley Bell, who's in the center here, this is him celebrating being elected to the city council. He was actually just elected as prosecuting attorney of St. Louis County, replacing Bob McCullough, who oversaw the Darren Wilson grand jury decision. You know, there's people thought that Wesley Bell was his long shot for this position, and he resoundingly defeated McCullough. So the people really made their voice heard at the box. This is a photo by my coworker Laurie Scrivan, and this is Bruce Franks, and he's standing out in front of the Quick Trip holding a sign. And so Bruce Franks goes from being a protester out in the street holding signs to winning election to be a state representative, and this is him celebrating, you know, finding out he was elected state representative. So he goes from walking the streets of West Florissant and Ferguson to walking the streets or walking the halls of the state capitol in Jefferson City as a lawmaker. And some things haven't changed. You know, Ferguson re-elected their mayor at the time, and he was sort of a lightning rod for criticism. You know, but clearly the people of Ferguson voted, and they wanted him to remain mayor. This is a protest from last year in St. Louis. This was after a police officer had actually been charged with murder in the shooting of a man, and the police officer had been found not guilty at a bench trial, and there had been a large turnout of people that came out. There was some nights of violence here as well with this protest last year. You know, this white woman cleaning up the broken glass with this black guy, you know, they're all coming together. So, you know, St. Louis is, you know, there's no easy way to define all this stuff. And this is some protesters burning the Ferguson Report outside of City Hall. Some people feel like change isn't happening fast enough, and I can understand that point of view. But it's also hard to see change when you're in the middle of it. The Ferguson Report, people who did the Ferguson Report have now become Forward Through Ferguson, and they released a report last year saying that they are making progress on many of the items outlisted in the report. So I think that's it. I ran just a little bit over time here and stuff. This is the end slide here. I'll let them sort of talk me out. If you have any questions, I can stick around on the line.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm rendered nearly speechless. Thank you so much. That was incredibly powerful. We can stay on here. If people do have questions, please send them through the chat box. If you're able to stay and you have a question, please feel free. I'll just ask a question. So a lot of time has passed since all of this took place. What is the sense these days in Ferguson? How are people feeling?
Well, you know, I mentioned there at the end that Wesley Bell had just been elected prosecutor for St. Louis County, and that was really a vote that people saw that as affirmation that they were right, and that their protests and their activism is showing results here and stuff. And so that really made people feel pretty good about things recently. There's also currently the store where Michael Brown and the shop owner had the incident there. Protesters have been shutting down that store. They're accusing the store of selling drugs in the community and not being a good influence in the community. They actually want the store to be sold to Michael Brown's father. And so they've been standing outside the store trying to get it shut down. It was shut down off and on for a week and stuff. But, you know, there's still an active group of protesters in this city, trying to hold police accountable for things and trying to push things forward. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm curious, you mentioned throughout your talk, you know, sort of what you were thinking and feeling, but as you reflect now, looking back, what struck you the most of everything you witnessed?
I think that, you know, when I look back at it, you know, I guess I'm not surprised that this happened. I'm not surprised that this happened in St. Louis. I guess maybe we had done a story 11 years before Ferguson ever happened in 2003 called Law and Disorder, where we looked at this at the St. Louis municipal structure, which is, you know, with all these different municipalities and these 90, you know, more than 90 different municipalities and all these different little small police departments. I mean, there's some municipalities that are less than 1 square mile that would have their own police department. And, you know, we did a major 3-day investigation in the paper of these municipalities and the way they operated, and they would fine people they'd give people traffic fines. The way these municipalities would make money is they just run out there and they'd run radar on the traffic, and they'd pull you over, and then you get hit with a ticket for the traffic offense, and then you might not have insurance, and you get a ticket for that, and then you get a summons to court, and then people wouldn't have the money to pay the court fines, and so they wouldn't show up to court, so they'd get a warrant put out for them, and then you know, they'd end up getting pulled over again at some other point, and they'd be arrested because they'd have a bench warrant out for their arrest, and then they'd have to stay in jail because they wouldn't have the money to pay it. And so you were creating these debtor prisons. And we were doing the story back in 2003. And, you know, some people listened to it and made a little bit of a splash, but, you know, a week after it was done, no one was talking about it anymore. And so, you know, the conditions for this to happen in St. Louis were there. I mean, there was a problem with the way a lot of these smaller municipalities were happening. I would have thought that maybe it was going to be a different community. With a lesser trained police force. I guess I was surprised that it happened in Ferguson. Looking back at it, though, when you're reading the DOJ report and you've got a town of majority black residents, and there's only 1 black alderman on there, and I think of the 30-something police officers, there's only 3 black police officers. You know, all the things were there to make this happen, and the way it took off on social media was also amazing to see. You know, this entire narrative, the way police shootings had happened in the past was that the police kind of acted the way they acted during Ferguson there at the start, where they didn't really release a lot of information, and they didn't say much that was going on. But in the past, that was fine because there was no other narrative that could get established. But what was happening was the police weren't saying anything, but this entire narrative about how Mike Brown died was taking place on social media, and that, you know, Mike Brown died with his hands up and he was surrendering to the police, and there was all these things swirling on social media, and the police were really kind of blind to this narrative. They weren't responding to it, but this narrative was gaining a lot of traction on social media, and so that was a fascinating thing to see, that the police were kind of sticking to their typical playbook of not releasing a lot of information, and meanwhile this entire narrative was developing out here on social media, and because there was no counter narrative put forward by the police, people just accepted the social media narrative. You've since seen the St. Louis County Police Department now has a social media person. They hired a social media person to sort of monitor social media and kind of put their narrative out on social media. And the police are trying to be faster now about releasing information. But I also understand why they are sometimes hesitant to put out information very fast, because it becomes like a game of phone tag where a game of telephone where you're passing something on and on and on, and sometimes the guy out front trying to give the information doesn't have all the facts because all the facts aren't there, or maybe he misunderstood something. So it's, I think there's a balance between releasing information quickly and fully and not. I think that body cameras would go a long ways to resolving a lot of things. I realize that body cameras can make you look, can provide something that may not be what it actually, it can look like something different than it is. But I think I'd rather listen to an explanation of why the video I'm looking at is not what's actually happening, than just try to rely upon police officer reports, because St. Louis, we've got a problem with police officers not always telling the truth about stuff. In fact, there's a list of 28 police officers that our current prosecuting attorney in the city says she will no longer accept police cases from these 28 officers because she can't trust them on the stand. So there are many, many great police officers. I'm friends with a number of them. I think police officers are important to have in the community. But there's also some bad police officers, and we got to do a better job of getting the police people who shouldn't be police officers out of the system and not protect them, because they do tend to get protected by the blue wall there.